I didn't know my life was about to break in half that night, before the party and after the truth. 6 days ago, my fiancé looked at me while tightening his tie in the mirror and said something that hollowed me out from the inside. Don't talk too much tonight. My friends already think you're basic. He didn't say it cruelly. That was almost worse. He said it like it was common sense, like he was protecting me from embarrassment, like I was the liability. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I was tired of arguing for my place in his life. At the party, he introduced me as someone he was seeing, not his fiancée, not the woman he'd proposed to 8 months ago, just someone. And then the slideshow started. By the time the screenshot appeared on the screen behind him, I watched his face drain of color. His smile froze. His drink slipped from his hand and shattered on the concrete floor. That was the moment he realized something. That asking me to stay silent had been the smartest thing he'd ever done. Just not for the reason he thought. My name is Claire. I'm 33 years old. And that night, I found out exactly how disposable I was to the man I was supposed to marry. I'd been with Lucas for 2.5 years. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue. One of those warm, forgettable afternoons where nothing feels permanent yet. We stood near the grill, talking about work, laughing at stupid stories. He was charming in an effortless way. Confident. Polished. Like he already belonged in every room he walked into. He worked in public relations. Image was everything to him. Image was everything around him. His apartment looked like it had never been lived in. His social media looked like a highlight reel. Even the way he talked about his life felt rehearsed. At first, I admired it. I thought he was someone who knew where he was going. I worked in IT infrastructure. Solid job, stable income, nothing flashy, nothing that made people lean in with interest when I said it out loud. But I liked my work. I liked the life I was building. For a while, that was enough. Then, slowly, it wasn't. Around the 1-year mark, the comments started slipping out. My friends are dating lawyers now. You're not really into the same conversations they are. Maybe don't mention work tonight. Try to sound more interesting. Small things. Easy to excuse. Easy to tell myself I was overthinking. Until he stopped calling me his fiancé. Sometimes I was his girlfriend. Sometimes I was his friend. Sometimes I was just someone he was seeing. Like our engagement was optional. Like it depended on who was listening. I confronted him once, 6 weeks before the party. We were sitting in his car after a dinner where he'd introduced me as a friend. The word burned more than I expected. Why didn't you tell them we're engaged? I asked. He kept his eyes on the road. Because it wasn't relevant. Relevant. We were 7 months away from getting married, and I wasn't relevant. That was the first time I felt it clearly. The quiet shift. The moment where love stopped feeling mutual and started feeling conditional. And at Monica's birthday party, in a rented loft filled with strangers, loud music, and perfectly curated laughter, everything finally snapped into focus. When the screenshot appeared, when his private words became public, when I read exactly how he talked about me to his friends. Safe, convenient, too oblivious to notice betrayal. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't make a scene. I walked out. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is stop begging to be seen. Before everything shattered, there was a version of my life that felt steady, ordinary in a good way. I was 33, working full-time in IT infrastructure, the kind of job that doesn't impress people at cocktail parties, but pays the bills, builds savings, and lets you sleep at night. I liked routines. Morning coffee at the same cafe, weekend grocery runs, a small circle of friends who knew me well enough to tell when I was forcing a smile. When I met Lucas, I felt like I'd stepped into a different world. He was 30, already established in public relations, always talking about branding, perception, and who you're seen with. He had this confidence that filled a room before he spoke. People leaned toward him when he talked. He knew how to make everyone feel like they mattered, at least for the length of a conversation. At that barbecue where we met, he asked questions that made me feel interesting. Not impressive, interesting. He laughed easily. He listened. When he asked for my number, it felt natural, unforced. Our early months were good, easy. He planned dates that felt thoughtful, restaurants I'd never tried, events I wouldn't have chosen on my own. I introduced him to my friends. He charmed them without trying. When he met my family, he brought flowers, remembered names, followed up with thank you messages. Everyone liked him. When I met his friends, though, I felt the difference immediately. They were polished, loud, opinionated. Conversations revolved around promotions, aesthetics, and who had access to what. I noticed how Lucas shifted around them, his posture straighter, his laugh sharper, his stories more exaggerated. I told myself I was imagining it. His family was warm but distant. His mother asked polite questions without ever really waiting for the answers. His sister smiled but studied me like I was a resume. I felt like I was constantly being evaluated, not as a person, but as a fit. Still, when he proposed 8 months ago, I said yes without hesitation. He did it properly. Ring, dinner, speech about our future. I cried. He looked proud, like he'd checked off a milestone at the right time in his life. I didn't question it. Looking back, that's when the shift accelerated. The comments became more pointed. Maybe don't wear that tonight. They're really into deeper conversations. You don't have to jump in every time. He never said be quiet outright, not at first. He framed it as advice, as protection, as helping me navigate his world. And I let him. I started choosing my words carefully, letting conversations pass without joining, smiling when I wanted to speak, shrinking myself just enough to keep the peace. When he introduced me as his fiancée in front of people who mattered to him professionally, I felt relief. When he didn't, I felt confused, then embarrassed, then angry, then tired. I told myself relationships required compromise, that love wasn't about ego, that I shouldn't make things harder for him. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't compromising, I was disappearing. By the time Monica's party came around, I already knew my role. I just hadn't admitted it yet. I was the safe choice, the dependable option, the woman who fit his timeline, even if I didn't fit his image. And I walked into that party already smaller than I'd ever been. After that conversation in the car, the one where he told me our engagement wasn't relevant, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. Not the paranoid kind of attention, but the quiet, aching awareness that comes when your instincts finally wake up. I noticed how Lucas spoke about me when I wasn't directly included in the conversation, how his voice shifted when he mentioned my name, how he'd skim over details, soften descriptions, or redirect entirely. If someone asked how we met, he'd answer quickly, then move on. If someone asked what I did for work, he'd summarize it in one sentence and pivot to something else. If someone congratulated him on the engagement, he'd smile, thank them, and immediately change the subject. It felt like watching someone slowly erase you while you were standing right beside them. There were moments that stuck with me, not because they were dramatic, but because they were small and sharp. At a dinner with his colleagues, someone asked, "So when's the wedding?" Before I could answer, Lucas laughed and said, "We're still figuring things out," then launched into a story about a client crisis. At his sister's birthday, he introduced me as his girlfriend. When I corrected him later, quietly in the kitchen, he sighed and said, "It just didn't matter in that moment." It always didn't matter. His friends noticed, even if they didn't say it out loud. I caught glances, raised eyebrows, smirks when I wasn't looking. One of his friends once asked, half joking, "So are you two actually getting married, or is this just a long engagement thing?" Lucas laughed. I forced a smile. I started to feel like I was constantly on probation. The worst part wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't. He stopped asking about my day, stopped asking for my opinion, stopped introducing me with pride. When I brought it up, he accused me of being insecure. "You're reading too much into things. You're being sensitive. This is just how my friends are." And every time he said that, I questioned myself instead of him. I replayed conversations in my head, wondering if I'd misheard, if I'd misunderstood, if I was expecting too much. At night, lying beside him, I felt this strange distance. His body was there, warm, familiar, but his attention was always somewhere else. His phone, his work, his social calendar. Once, half asleep, I asked, "Do you actually want to marry me?" He didn't answer right away. That pause did more damage than any argument ever could. "Of course I do," he finally said. "Why would you even ask that?" I didn't push, I never did. I told myself love meant trusting the answer, not the hesitation. By the time he told me about Monica's party, the unease had settled deep in my chest. He'd been talking about it for weeks. The guest list, the venue, the kind of people who would be there. The morning of the party, watching him get ready, I already felt like I was walking into something I wasn't meant to be part of. When he finally said it, "Don't talk too much tonight. My friends already think you're basic," it didn't come out of nowhere. It was just the first time he said the quiet part out loud. And somehow, I still went. The loft downtown looked exactly like Lucas had described it. Exposed brick walls, dim lighting, music loud enough to drown out real conversations, people dressed like they were all auditioning for the same life. Everyone held a drink. Everyone laughed, just a little too hard. Lucas walked in like he belonged there. I followed half a step behind. Almost immediately, he spotted Monica and her group. He squeezed my hand once, quickly, like a courtesy, then let go and moved toward them. "Happy birthday," he said, already smiling. Monica hugged him, then turned to me. "Oh, hey." "Hey, happy birthday," I replied. She nodded, already turning back to him. "Come on, let me introduce you to some people." He went with her without looking back. I stood there for a moment, drink in hand, watching him disappear into the crowd. I told myself not to take it personally, that this was just how parties were, that I'd find my place eventually. For the next hour, I barely saw him. Every time I tried to join a conversation he was in, he'd give me that look, the tight smile, the warning eyes, the silent "not now." So I stepped back, again and again. I stayed quiet, just like he'd asked. Around 9, someone shouted that the slideshow was about to start, Monica's life in pictures. Everyone gathered near the main wall where the projector had been set up. I stayed toward the back. Lucas moved to the front, standing beside Monica and her friends, holding a fresh drink, relaxed, confident. The slideshow began. Baby pictures, childhood photos, awkward teenage moments. Everyone laughed, made comments, teased Monica. She loved the attention. Then the images shifted to college. Photos of Monica and Lucas in matching costumes. At the beach, at parties, arms around each other, drinks in hand. And then the screen changed. Not a photo, a screenshot. A text conversation, Monica's name at the top. I felt it before I read it. That drop in my stomach, that sudden, icy stillness in the room. The first message was Monica's. "Do you really think you should marry her?" Lucas's response was right there, clear, impossible to misunderstand. "I don't know, probably not." I heard someone gasp softly behind me. The next message appeared. "Then why are you still engaged?" His reply came up a second later. "Because I'm 30 and I don't want to start over. She's safe. She's not going anywhere." My hands started to shake. The final message loaded slowly, like the room needed time to absorb it. "I'll probably cheat on her eventually anyway. She won't even notice." Silence. Not awkward silence, not confused silence. The kind of silence that happens when everyone understands the same terrible thing at the same time. I watched Lucas's face as he read it. The color drained from him. His smile vanished. His eyes darted around the room, searching. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. "Oh my God," someone whispered. Monica rushed towards the laptop, fumbling, trying to skip the slide, her voice shaking. "Wait, hold on, this isn't—" But it was too late. Everyone had seen it. Lucas turned slowly, scanning the room until his eyes found mine. Across the space, surrounded by people, noise, and broken glass, we looked at each other. His face was panicked. Mine was calm. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for an explanation. I turned around and walked out. Because nothing he could say in that moment would ever undo what he'd already shown me. I don't remember the elevator ride down. I don't remember stepping out into the street. I remember the cold air hitting my face and realizing I was breathing too fast, like my body was trying to catch up with what my mind had just seen. I got into my car and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. The city moved around me, people laughing, cars passing, music leaking out of open doors, but everything felt distant, like I was watching it through glass. I didn't cry. Not yet. I drove without really knowing where I was going until I pulled up outside my friend Kevin's place. I hadn't planned it. My body just knew where to go. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and stepped aside without asking questions. Inside, I finally spoke. I told him everything. The comments, the introductions, the text, the slideshow. When I finished, my voice sounded calm, almost detached, like I was telling someone else's story. "Jesus," Kevin said quietly. That's brutal." I nodded. He said I was safe. Kevin didn't need clarification. My phone started buzzing on the coffee table. Lucas. I flipped it face down. It buzzed again and again. Calls, texts, notifications stacking on top of each other. I silenced it. That night, I slept on Kevin's couch, though sleep is probably too generous a word. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the screen. The words. She won't even notice. I noticed. By morning, my phone was full. Missed calls, voicemails, messages that blurred together. "Please call me." It's not what it looked like. That text was taken out of context. I was just venting. "I love you." One message was from Monica. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know that screenshot was in the slideshow." Someone else added it as a joke. I never meant for you to see that. I didn't respond. I sat on the couch, phone in my hand, trying to understand how someone could casually plan to betray the person they were supposed to marry. How he could say it like it was inevitable, like it was normal. Around noon, Kevin asked, "Are you going to talk to him?" "Not today." "What are you thinking?" I took a breath. "I'm thinking he told his friend he was going to cheat on me and that I was too oblivious to notice." Kevin didn't argue. "Yeah, that's pretty clear. So what's there to talk about?" He didn't have an answer. The rest of the weekend passed in a haze. I ignored the calls, ignored the messages, let my shock slowly turn into something heavier, something sharper. On Sunday night, there was a knock at the door. Kevin answered. I could hear their voices from the couch. "Is she here?" Lucas asked. Kevin glanced back at me. I shook my head. "She doesn't want to see you," Kevin said. "Please," Lucas said. "I just need 5 minutes." "No." I stood up. Lucas looked different up close. No confident smile, no perfect posture. His hair was messy, his eyes red, his voice unsteady. "Please," he said again. "Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I said. "I didn't mean it." "You said it." I was venting. I was frustrated. "Frustrated with what?" I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger, clarity. "You told me not to talk at your friend's party because they already think I'm basic," I said. "You introduced me as someone you're seeing. You told your friend I'm safe, that you'll probably cheat and I won't notice." He started crying. I didn't. "I wasn't planning to cheat," he said. "People say things they don't mean." "Do they?" I asked. "Because that sounded like something you'd already decided." "Are we breaking up?" he asked, his voice breaking. "What do you think?" "I think you're upset and not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking clearer than I have in months," I said. "You don't respect me, and I'm done pretending that's something I can fix." I stepped back. "Go home, Lucas." He stood there for a moment longer, then turned and left. Kevin closed the door behind him. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I will be." I thought the worst of it was over once Lucas walked away from that door. I was wrong. The calls didn't stop. They multiplied. At first it was just him. Long messages, paragraphs explaining how the text was taken out of context, how he was under pressure, how he never meant any of it. He said he loved me so many times it started to lose meaning. Then his friends got involved. One message after another appeared on my phone, each one pretending to be neutral, reasonable, concerned. "He's really struggling. You know he didn't mean it like that. Everyone vents sometimes. You should at least hear him out." Monica sent another apology, longer this time. She said she felt responsible, that she never should have let the slideshow go live without checking it, that she felt sick knowing I'd seen those messages that way. I read it once, then I put my phone down, because none of that changed what he said. None of it erased the words, "I'll probably cheat on her eventually." By midweek, his family reached out. His sister messaged first. She said she was shocked by what happened, but that Lucas was under an incredible amount of stress. Wedding pressure, work pressure, life pressure. She said people make mistakes when they're overwhelmed. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Planning to cheat isn't a mistake, it's a decision. She never replied. Then his mother called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail anyway. Her voice was calm, practiced. She said relationships require forgiveness, that I shouldn't throw away years over one ugly moment, that Lucas had always spoken highly of me, and that this situation didn't reflect who he truly was. I wondered if she knew he'd been ashamed of me, if she knew he'd introduced me as an acquaintance, if she knew he thought I was too oblivious to notice betrayal. Or maybe she did know, and this was easier. Even some of my friends wavered. A couple of them said I should give him a chance to explain, that everyone says stupid things they don't mean, that walking away without a final conversation might leave me with regrets. But most of them saw it clearly. They saw the pattern. They heard the words he used. They recognized the slow erosion of respect that I'd been trying to ignore. I stayed at Kevin's longer than I planned. Not because I couldn't go home, but because I wasn't ready to walk back into a space that had already started to feel like a lie. Every night, I replayed moments from the past year. The pauses before he answered questions. The way he'd steer conversations away from me. The times he'd made me feel like I needed to earn my place beside him. I wasn't heartbroken the way I thought I'd be. I was exhausted. By the end of the second week, something inside me shifted. The shock faded. The sadness settled. And underneath it all, something stronger began to take shape. Resolve. I stopped responding. Stopped explaining. Stopped defending my decision. Because no one else had lived inside that relationship the way I had. And no one else had stood in that room, watching their future collapse under fluorescent lights. The quiet was the hardest part. Once the calls slowed and the messages stopped flooding in, there was nothing left to distract me from the weight of it all. No adrenaline, no shock, just the hollow space where my future had been. I went back to the apartment during the day while Lucas was at work. We'd agreed on a time so we wouldn't see each other. I told myself it would be quick. Just grab my things and leave. The door opened to silence. Everything was exactly where it had been. The couch we picked together. The kitchen table where we'd talked about seating charts and color palettes. The ring box on the dresser, still empty because I hadn't worn it since the party. I stood there longer than I meant to. Every object felt heavier than it should have, like it was asking me to remember something, to question myself, to wonder if I was being too harsh. I packed slowly. Each item felt like a small ending. Clothes, shoes, books, pieces of a life I thought was settled. Halfway through filling a box, I sat down on the floor and finally cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that came without warning. Tears for the woman I'd been when I said yes, for the trust I'd given so freely, for the way I'd let myself shrink to make someone else comfortable. I wondered if I'd missed something, if I'd been too patient, if I'd stayed quiet one time too many. For the first time, doubt crept in. Maybe I should have fought harder. Maybe I should have demanded more. Maybe I should have seen it sooner. That night, back at Kevin's, the loneliness hit me fully. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining what my life would look like now. Starting over at 33, explaining the breakup, canceling a wedding everyone already knew about. I felt small, exposed, replaceable. There was a moment, just a moment, where I almost reached for my phone, almost typed out a message asking to talk, almost asked for clarity I already had. That was the lowest point, because it wasn't about missing him. It was about being afraid of the space he left behind. But somewhere in that darkness, another thought followed. If I went back, nothing would change. He'd still see me as safe, still think he was settling, still believe he could cross lines and I'd stay. And I knew, with a certainty that hurt, that if I accepted that once, I'd be accepting it forever. That realization didn't lift the pain, but it stopped me from going back. The shift didn't happen all at once. It came quietly, without drama, the way real decisions usually do. A few days after packing my things, I went back to the apartment one last time to pick up what I'd left behind. We'd agreed Lucas wouldn't be there. I needed that distance to stay intact. But when I opened the door, he was sitting on the couch. He stood up the second he saw me. "I took the day off," he said quickly. "I needed to see you." "You shouldn't have," I replied, setting my keys down carefully. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. "Please," he said, "can we just talk? Really talk?" I looked at him for a long moment. He looked smaller somehow, less certain, less composed. "Fine," I said, "talk." He paced as he spoke, hands twisting together, words spilling out faster than they could settle. "I know what I said was horrible. I know it hurt you. But I need you to understand where I was mentally. I was overwhelmed. Work was intense. The wedding was intense. I just needed to vent, and Monica was there." "You didn't vent," I said calmly. "You planned." "That's not fair. You said you'd probably cheat on me eventually, and that I wouldn't notice." "I didn't mean it like that." "Then how did you mean it?" He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "I was frustrated," he said. "I felt stuck." "With me?" I asked. He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. "You said I was safe," I continued. Like that was a bad thing. Like loyalty was something you tolerated instead of valued. "I love you," he said desperately. "I wouldn't have proposed if I didn't." "You love the idea of being engaged," I said. "You love how it looks. You love having someone steady beside you while you chase approval from everyone else." His eyes filled with tears. "That's not true." "Then why have you spent the last year making me feel like I'm something you need to explain away?" I asked. "Why did you introduce me differently depending on the room? Why did you ask me to stay quiet so your friends wouldn't judge you?" He sank back onto the couch. "I made mistakes," he whispered. "You made choices," I corrected, repeated ones. For the first time, I wasn't trying to convince him. I wasn't trying to be understood. I was just stating facts. "I deserve to be with someone who is proud of me," I said. "Someone who doesn't see me as a placeholder. Someone who doesn't plan betrayal like it's inevitable." He looked up at me, panicked. "So that's it? You're just walking away?" "I'm not giving up," I said. "I'm choosing myself." That was the moment. Not the party, not the screenshot, not even the text. This was the turning point. I picked up my box, walked past him, and left without looking back. And for the first time since everything began to fall apart, I felt something close to peace. I didn't announce my decision. I didn't explain it to everyone who asked. I just left. And somehow, that was enough to start everything unraveling on its own. Within days, the story began circulating. Not my version, his. Lucas told people I'd walked away over a misunderstanding, that I'd refused to communicate, that I'd been emotional, overwhelmed, unable to handle a difficult conversation. A few people believed him. Most didn't, because the screenshot still existed, because too many people had seen it with their own eyes, because the way he'd spoken about me hadn't been subtle. It had just been private. Friends who used to orbit him so comfortably started pulling back. Invitations slowed. Group chats went quiet. The same people who once praised his confidence now spoke carefully around him, like they weren't sure what version of him they were dealing with anymore. His sister stopped messaging altogether. His mother never called again. I heard things secondhand, that he was defensive, that he was angry, that he was insisting people didn't understand the context. But context didn't save him. The truth had already landed. A week later, Monica reached out one final time. She said she felt responsible, that she'd never meant to expose something so personal, that she wished she could take it back. I told her the truth. The screenshot didn't create anything, I said. It just revealed it. She didn't argue. I think he realizes what he lost, she said. That's not my problem, I replied. I blocked Lucas's number after that, blocked him on social media, removed every remaining thread that tied my life to his. It wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, and it was final. 2 weeks later, I moved into a new apartment. Smaller, less polished, mine. I bought furniture I liked without wondering what anyone else would think. I hung art that didn't match anything. I sat on the floor eating takeout the first night and felt lighter than I had in months. I focused on work, spent time with friends who never asked me to shrink, let myself exist without performing. Occasionally, I'd hear updates through mutual acquaintances. Lucas was struggling. Lucas was defensive. Lucas was saying he'd been misunderstood. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't need to. The fallout wasn't something I engineered. It was something he walked into on his own. And for the first time, the consequences weren't mine to carry. It's been 6 weeks now. Long enough for the noise to fade. Long enough for the adrenaline to leave my body. Long enough for the truth to settle into something solid instead of sharp. Lucas and I are completely done. No contact, no updates, no what ifs. I blocked his number, removed him from every corner of my life, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Healing doesn't happen when the door stays cracked open. My new apartment is quiet in a way that feels earned. It's smaller than the place we shared, but it's filled with things that belong to me. My routines are different now, slower, more intentional. I don't rush to impress anyone anymore. I heard through mutual friends that Lucas has been telling people I abandoned him, that I overreacted, that I couldn't handle a difficult conversation. Some people believe him. Most don't, because actions leave trails, and his were visible long before the screenshot ever appeared. Monica reached out one last time a couple of weeks ago. She said she felt responsible for how everything unfolded, that she wished the screenshot had never been shown. I told her something I hadn't admitted to myself until then. If it hadn't happened that night, I said, it would have happened later, after the wedding, after I was legally tied to someone who already saw me as temporary. She agreed. And that's the truth that brings me peace. I didn't lose a future, I escaped one. I'm not angry anymore. I don't need closure from someone who already gave me clarity. I'm grateful I found out who he was before I built my life around him. I'm grateful I listened when my instincts finally spoke louder than my fear. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's this. If someone asks you to stay quiet so they can shine, they are already dimming your light. If someone calls you safe like it's an insult, they don't deserve your loyalty. And if someone plans betrayal like it's inevitable, believe them. I'm 33, single, starting over. And for the first time in a long time, my life doesn't require anyone's approval. I'm not anyone's safe option. I'm not anyone's placeholder. I'm not a backup plan.